The early morning fog hung low over the Appalachian Mountains, swirling around the peaks like a living thing. Captain Hayes stepped off the transport vehicle, her boots crunching against the gravel, eyes scanning the tree line with practiced precision. The chill of dawn bit at her skin, but she felt nothing unusual. It was just another day, another mission, another training exercise. Yet today, she wasn't just any ranger. She was a veteran, a soldier who had survived operations others only read about in classified reports. And though most of the cadets around her didn't know it yet, they were about to witness something unforgettable. The base was alive with the sound of helicopters warming up. Engines roared, rotor blades slicing through the cold air, stirring the fog and rattling the nearby cabins. Cadets moved hurriedly across the grounds, hauling gear, checking weapons, and exchanging nervous chatter. Adjusted her tactical vest with calm precision, ensuring everything was in its proper place. Her movements were deliberate, efficient, and completely unhurried. Unlike the younger cadets, her hands did not tremble, her breathing did not hitch. She carried herself with a quiet authority that demanded respect, even if it went unspoken. Whispers rippled among the cadets as they sized her up. Frame was smaller than most of the men. Her face carried the faintest hint of exhaustion, though not from fatigue but from countless operations where sleep was a luxury she could not afford. "She's tiny," one cadet muttered to another, shaking his head. "There's no way she can keep up." Another smirked. "Yeah, probably just another ambitious officer who thinks she's ready for Ranger training." Their laughter was nervous, tinged with the fear of being by someone who looked at first glance unassuming. They had no idea. Didn't respond, she never did. Words were unnecessary. Experience spoke louder than opinions, louder than whispers, louder than fear. She walked toward the briefing tent, her boots silent against the mud-slicked ground, scanning everything. The rotor wash from the helicopters, the angles of nearby trees, even the subtle movements of birds startled into flight. Every detail mattered. Every observation counted. Her mind cataloged, calculated, and prepared for what was coming. The high-altitude insertion exercise that would test cadets' nerves, agility, and survival instincts. Inside the tent, the barked instructions, gesturing to diagrams of the mountains and valleys below. Cadets shifted nervously, double-checking harnesses and lines. Listened silently, memorizing every detail, every potential hazard, every contingency. While others fussed over minor adjustments or whispered reassurances to one another, she visualized the drop in her mind. The wind currents, the angle of descent, the landing zones, the cover points, the escape routes. She had done this before, in worse conditions, under fire, thousands of miles from home. This was simple by comparison. A few cadets dared glance at her, searching for signs of doubt or fear. They found none. Calm was unnerving. Her eyes were steady, scanning the room and the training manuals, yet her posture relaxed, almost casual. She seemed to belong somewhere far beyond this temporary training ground. She was focused, prepared, and ready to lead, not just herself, but anyone who followed. And though no one knew it yet, today's exercise would reveal why she survived where others would have faltered. Why rangers like her didn't rely solely on equipment to endure the impossible. Outside, the helicopters roared louder, signaling that it was almost time. Cadets fidgeted, checking straps, securing helmets, and whispering anxious comments. Stepped closer to the aircraft, her gaze fixed on the open door, the swirling fog below, the drop zone marked on the map. Her mind was already descending, already moving, already surviving. The mountain awaited, and she would meet it on her terms, not with panic, but with precision, confidence, and a level of skill that would leave the cadets questioning everything they thought they knew about Ranger training. The helicopter's engines droned like distant thunder, shaking the cabin and rattling loose straps. Cadets fidgeted nervously, gripping harnesses and checking their parachutes one last time. The air smelled of fuel and sweat, of anticipation and fear. Hayes remained calm, sitting near the door, her body relaxed but alert, eyes fixed on the swirling fog below. She had been here before, countless times in worse conditions under fire when lives depended on every decision. For her, this jump was routine. For the cadets, it was a trial that could define their futures. The barked orders, his voice cutting through the roar. Cadets, line up, one at a time. Nervous laughter and whispered encouragements filled the cabin as the trainees shuffled forward, waited patiently, letting the nervous energy settle around her. When her turn arrived, she stood, adjusting her gloves and checking the harness one final time. Her movements were precise, almost ceremonial, and yet effortless. A few cadets stole glances at her, whispering, "She doesn't look scared." They were wrong to assume it was courage. They had no idea the depth of experience behind her composure. "Go," the shout split the wind. Step to the open door, looking down at the dense fog blanketing the mountains. The ground seemed impossibly far away, the drop terrifying to anyone untrained. She paused just for a heartbeat, assessing the currents, the wind, the rotation of the rotors. Then she leapt. The cadets gasped as she disappeared into the mist. Most of them expected the canopy of a parachute to unfurl immediately, but none appeared. Its body cut through the air like a dart, controlled, precise, as if gravity itself obeyed her. For a moment, disbelief froze the observers. Was this some trick? A hidden chute? None of it mattered. She hit the ground perfectly, absorbed the impact, and moved immediately, scanning for cover and assessing the terrain. Below, she navigated the tree line like a ghost. Branches bent without snapping, leaves barely rustled. Every footfall was calculated, deliberate. Cadets and instructors scrambled to track her descent, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Some whispered, others cursed under their breath, but all watched, transfixed, moved with a fluidity and precision that their understanding. She wasn't just surviving the fall, she was controlling it, mastering it, turning an impossible situation into an opportunity. When she disappeared into the forest, murmurs of awe and fear spread among the cadets. "How did she?" one stammered. Another shook his head, muttering, "That's impossible." This voice was tense as he radioed the instructors below, seeking confirmation that she had landed safely. Within minutes, she reappeared at the edge of the drop zone, scanning the cadets like a predator evaluating its environment. No panic, no sweat, no hesitation, just control. The camp quickly realized something. Hayes was not a typical trainee. Her movements, her composure, her confidence, all of it revealed experience that far exceeded anyone else present. Cadets whispered rumors of past deployments, of combat missions in hostile territory. Instructors shared uneasy glances. They had trained hundreds of soldiers, yet rarely had they encountered someone so undeniably competent. Approached the group, adjusting her gear with the same casual precision she had in the helicopter. She offered no explanation, no boast, only a faint nod. Her calm was unnerving, almost infuriating to those who had risked everything to follow instructions perfectly. The mountain around them was quiet now, holding its breath as the cadets processed what they had just witnessed. They had seen a ranger in action, one who did not rely on parachutes, luck, or chance. One who survived because she had mastered every variable and every risk. For the first time, doubt entered their minds. This was no ordinary training day. This was a lesson in humility, skill, and resilience. And Hayes had just written the first line. By the time returned to camp, whispers had erupted like wildfire. Cadets huddled in corners, exchanging theories. Some claimed she had used a hidden parachute. Others insisted she had cheated, somehow manipulating the rules. Her calm, collected demeanor only fueled speculation. She didn't correct them. She never did. Her silence was more powerful than any words, forcing them to confront their own assumptions. Hayes had arrived as just another cadet in their eyes, but now she loomed larger than anyone could comprehend. They called the cadets together, scrutinizing harnesses and gear, reminding them of procedure, moved among them, observing quietly. Her eyes noted weaknesses, inefficiencies, and hesitations that others missed. When a cadet misadjusted his straps, she stepped close, whispering a correction so subtle no one noticed. He executed it flawlessly, eyes wide in surprise, but didn't acknowledge it. She was teaching without teaching, correcting without appearing to. Her skill was invisible yet undeniable, and the cadets felt it, though they couldn't articulate it. Rumors spread quickly beyond the training ground. A few cadets mentioned seeing her operate in combat zones, silent, precise, deadly. Others scoffed at such claims. Surely she was just exaggerating her. But when the instructors reviewed her performance, they found anomalies. Every exercise she had completed showed perfection, sometimes beyond what simulations allowed. One instructor muttered, "She knows things no one here could possibly know." Whispers became a quiet hum of awe. Didn't care about accolades. She was focused, always observing, always calculating. Even during routine drills, she demonstrated an uncanny understanding of tactics. In exercises involving ambush simulations, she anticipated enemy movements before anyone else could. Cadets struggled to follow her lead, often failing despite her calm instructions. Each time, corrected with subtle gestures or minimal words, guiding them with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. Fear mixed with admiration in the cadets' eyes. They began to realize she wasn't merely skilled, she was exceptional. They couldn't yet name it, but a legend was forming in their midst. Some cadets, emboldened by curiosity or envy, tried to confront her. "Where did you get your experience?" one asked during lunch, voice low but challenging. Only smiled faintly, sipping her water. "Experience isn't something you can buy or borrow," she replied, tone neutral. That was all. The cadets exchanged glances, realizing her answer said more than any bragging could. She carried the weight of battles fought in silence, of missions too classified to discuss, and of survival in situations that would break most men. By the third day, the tension in camp had shifted. Quiet authority subtly altered the group dynamic. Those who once mocked her began following her example, imitating her focus, her discipline, her calm under pressure. Instructors took note, some with unease. Cadets whispered about her past deployments, imagining firefights, survival in hostile terrain, and victories won against impossible odds, yet remained enigmatic, never confirming, never denying. She let the work speak for itself, letting her skill unravel doubts naturally. Night fell over the camp, fog curling around tents like smoke. Cadets gathered around small fires, recounting the jump, whispering about her abilities. Even the boldest skeptics found their courage faltering in her presence. Sat apart, silently observing the stars through the canopy, mind cataloging every tree, every ridge, every detail of the terrain. She was preparing, always preparing for the next challenge. And the cadets had no idea how high the stakes would go, or how much they had yet to witness about the true meaning of skill, courage, and survival. By the end of the night, the rumors had taken on a life of their own. Hayes was no longer just a cadet. She was a legend in the making, a living lesson that the strongest and most capable often hide behind quiet composure. Doubt had shifted to awe, skepticism to fascination. And deep in the Appalachian fog, prepared for what would come next, ready to demonstrate that Rangers survive not by luck, but by mastery of every variable, every risk, and every decision. The sun had barely risen when the next challenge began, the helicopter fast-rope insertion. The massive rotors thrashed the fog into whirling sheets, rattling equipment and sending loose dirt tumbling down the mountainside. Cadets fumbled with harnesses and ropes, their nerves visible in shaky hands and quick, uneven breaths. Hayes stood at the edge of the landing zone, observing the chaos with quiet patience. The called names in a clipped tone, and one by one, cadets descended into the void. Many landed awkwardly, skidding, stumbling, their nerves betrayed by fear. His turn came. Cadets exchanged skeptical glances. She was smaller than most, her frame deceptively slight. "You sure you want this?" one muttered under his breath. Only nodded faintly, gloves tightening on the rope. Her eyes scanned the terrain below, the uneven rocks, loose dirt, tree roots, and shadows that could conceal hazards. She adjusted her grip, leaning back slightly, body weight centered and ready. Calm radiated from her, a stark contrast to the chaos around her. "Go," the barked. Slid down with controlled speed, her descent almost a glide rather than a fall. Branches snapped only slightly under her feet, leaves rustling gently, barely audible over the whir of the rotors. Cadets and instructors craned their necks, stunned. Where others skidded and flailed, landed cleanly, feet absorbing impact with precision, rolling seamlessly into a crouch to stabilize. She barely disturbed the dirt. Her landing was flawless. Immediately, she began assessing the area. Shadows shifted between the trees, subtle anomalies in the terrain visible only to a trained eye. Cadets tried to follow but stumbled on roots, rocks, and loose soil. Moved like water, every step deliberate, every decision calculated. Her calm, methodical scanning of the environment inspired awe and frustration. For once, the cadets realized that skill wasn't just about brute strength. It was intelligence, foresight, and the ability to remain composed under extreme stress. Instructors whispered to each other. "She's done this before," one muttered, voice tight with disbelief. Another nodded, noting her fluid movements and uncanny awareness. Cadets who had doubted her before now watched with a mix of fear and fascination. Didn't pause for recognition. Her focus remained on the task, the landing zone, and the path forward. Every instinct, honed through real combat, guided her in ways they could not yet comprehend. A cadet stumbled near her, losing balance on a hidden route. Reached out, catching his shoulder with minimal effort, guiding him upright with a slight nod. He froze, grateful and confused. No one else could have moved so decisively under such conditions. The lesson was clear. Leadership wasn't just about orders. It was about presence, awareness, and protecting the team. By the time all cadets had descended, had already scouted key points, identified hazards, and positioned them strategically for the next exercise. The helicopter's engines roared as it pulled away, leaving dust and fog in its wake. Cadets stared, breathless and humbled, realizing that this was more than a physical test. It was a demonstration of expertise and survival instinct. Rumors of her past experience circulated quietly among the cadets. Whispers grew into speculation: overseas missions, clandestine operations, and combat experience. Never confirmed, never. She simply prepared silently for the next phase, allowing her performance to teach lessons far beyond words. That day, cadets learned that skill was often invisible until it revealed itself, and when it did, it could leave a permanent mark. As the fog thinned and morning light illuminated the mountains, stood at the edge of the clearing, calm and collected. She had led without words, demonstrated mastery without effort, and reminded everyone why Rangers relied on skill, not luck. For the cadets, the lesson had begun to sink in. Underestimate her at your own peril. The forest was alive with tension. Cadets crouched behind rocks and tree trunks, rifles trembling in their hands as simulated enemy fire echoed through the Appalachian Ridge. Smoke grenades hissed and splintered the morning mist, turning the training zone into a chaotic theater of war. Cadets shouted coordinates, tried to regroup, and scrambled for cover. Amid the chaos, Hayes moved with unnatural calm. Every footstep was measured, every glance deliberate, every motion deliberate. She wasn't reacting to the ambush, she anticipated it. "Move," she whispered to a nearby group, barely audible over the cacophony. Cadets froze, unsure whether they heard correctly. Yet they obeyed, finding themselves guided toward safer positions by instinct alone. His body seemed to flow with the terrain, anticipating unseen dangers before they materialized. Her knowledge of cover, concealment, and enemy psychology was evident in every movement. The cadets began to realize that this wasn't a drill, it was a demonstration of real battlefield mastery. An explosion echoed nearby, scattering leaves and dirt. One cadet panicked, exposing himself. Was there in a heartbeat, positioning him behind a tree and pointing silently toward the next safe route. His heart raced, mind spinning with disbelief. She didn't shout, she didn't lecture. Her leadership was in action itself, instant, precise, and effective. By the time the instructors arrived to assess, had already neutralized the enemy, secured her group, and prepared the team for the next phase. The cadets' murmurs of awe grew louder. "How does she know where to move before it happens?" one whispered. Another shook his head. "It's like she can see the future." Didn't answer. She simply kept moving, scanning, calculating, ensuring no one faltered. Every decision, every gesture conveyed more than words ever could. The drill, which had overwhelmed many of the cadets, became a manageable operation under her silent guidance. Instructors took notes, exchanging wary glances. They had trained countless soldiers, yet instincts standard teaching. Her calm under pressure, her ability to read terrain and anticipate danger, revealed experience far beyond that of any cadet present. They realized something vital. Hayes wasn't just following procedures. She had survived situations most only read about. She didn't rely on luck or guidance. She relied on mastery. One cadet tried to challenge her subtly, taking the lead on a tactical maneuver. Observed quietly, then gently corrected him, repositioning him without a word. He executed perfectly, a mix of shock and relief crossing his face. The lesson was profound. Leadership required skill, composure, and timing. Force and volume were ineffective against true expertise. Demonstrated that knowledge and experience could guide others in life-or-death scenarios with quiet authority. By the end of the drill, the cadets were exhausted, covered in dirt, sweat, and simulated grime. But they were alive, intact, and more importantly, inspired. They had witnessed firsthand the precision and calm of someone who had survived real combat, had turned chaos into order, fear into confidence, and confusion into strategy. Her methods were invisible, yet unforgettable. As the sun climbed higher, breaking through the mist, surveyed the scene. Cadets looked at her differently now, not with doubt but with tentative respect and curiosity. Instructors whispered to each other, recognizing that her skill had fundamentally changed the way the camp would view training. Hayes had not only survived the ambush, she had transformed it into a living lesson. The cadets would carry the memory of her precision and calm long after the smoke cleared. That evening, around the dwindling campfire, cadets spoke in hushed tones about the ambush. Some still struggled to accept it, others were quietly inspired. Remained silent as always, letting her actions speak louder than speculation. But a subtle shift had occurred. Respect had replaced doubt, awe had replaced mockery, and the legend of the ranger who didn't need luck was beginning to take root. As twilight settled over the Appalachian Mountains, the cadets gathered near the tents, weary from the day's relentless drills. Hayes moved quietly among them, her calm presence drawing subtle attention. Instructors whispered among themselves, exchanging uneasy glances. One senior officer, Colonel Mitchell, lingered at the edge of the group, eyes narrowed, recognition flickering in his gaze. Something about her movements, her composure, and her instinctive control of the exercises was familiar, too familiar for an ordinary ranger trainee. Mitchell stepped forward, signaling to follow him to a quieter area. The cadets noticed the unusual seriousness in his posture and exchanged uncertain glances. He motioned for her to stand at ease and studied her quietly. "Hayes," he began, voice low but commanding, "I recognize you from operations that are classified. Your presence here was unexpected." The expression remained neutral, betraying no emotion, yet her eyes reflected understanding. The moment was delicate. She had trained for it without knowing it would come. A ripple of disbelief ran through the nearby cadets who had overheard fragments. Whispers turned to stunned murmurs. Hayes, their quiet, unassuming peer, had survived real combat operations that few could even imagine. Colonel Mitchell continued, recounting missions in hostile territories, where had demonstrated courage, tactical genius, and survival skills that had saved entire teams under fire. The cadets' eyes widened. Their earlier skepticism dissolved, replaced by awe and a dawning understanding that they were in the presence of someone extraordinary. Listened silently, as she always did, letting the officer speak without interruption. She had survived more than most could fathom, endured more than many would survive, yet she never sought recognition. Her focus was never on accolades or attention. It had always been on mastery, precision, and survival. The cadets nearby could hardly believe it. The very same who had calmly leapt from a helicopter without a parachute, who had guided them through ambush drills, was a decorated combat veteran. As the revelation sank in, cadets began to look at her differently. The jokes, the skepticism, and the quiet doubts evaporated, replaced by respect and admiration. Modesty amplified the impact. She did not boast, she did not exaggerate. She simply existed as a living example of discipline, skill, and courage. Those who had doubted her now realized that true experience could be invisible until tested under pressure. Colonel Mitchell placed a hand on his shoulder, signaling approval. "You have more than proven yourself here," he said. "Your presence has taught these cadets something they could never learn from manuals or simulations. Skill, courage, and calm under pressure. These are lessons only lived experience can teach." Inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the praise without fanfare. The cadets who had witnessed her feats replayed the day in their minds. The parachute-less jump, the helicopter fast-rope insertion, and the ambush drill. Each moment now carried a new weight of meaning, had been testing them, guiding them, challenging them, all without overt instruction. Her lessons were subtle yet profound, teaching that mastery was not flashy but quiet, reliable, and deadly effective. By nightfall, the camp felt transformed. Cadets lingered near their tents, speaking in hushed, reverent tones. Instructors discussed her techniques, secretly comparing their training methods to what they had just observed. Hayes had not only survived their scrutiny, she had inspired, impressed, and commanded respect. The revelation of her past missions and combat history elevated her from trainee to legend, an embodiment of what Rangers could achieve with skill, focus, and courage. As walked to her tent, the camp silent behind her, cadets realized something fundamental. They had been in the presence of excellence disguised as humility. She had taught without words, led without authority, and survived without reliance on luck. Hayes was no ordinary ranger. She was the standard by which all others would now be measured, and the mountain air seemed to carry a subtle acknowledgement of her presence, quiet, unyielding, and unstoppable. Night had fallen over the Appalachian training grounds, shrouding the forest in shadow and fog. Cadets huddled, gripping rifles and checking gear, hearts pounding in anticipation of the final exercise. A night extraction across rugged, unfamiliar terrain, under simulated enemy fire. Fear and excitement rippled through the group, the tension nearly tangible. Instructors shouted last-minute instructions, but it was clear that success would depend less on rote training than on instinct, awareness, and courage. Hayes stepped forward, her figure barely visible in the dim light. Her calm presence drew attention instantly, and cadets instinctively looked to her for guidance. The air around her was steady, her breathing controlled, her eyes scanning the terrain like a predator sizing up its domain. She didn't speak unnecessarily. Words were wasted energy. Instead, she began moving, her steps deliberate, her path through the rugged underbrush precise and confident. The exercise began. Explosions of smoke and simulated gunfire punctuated the darkness, sending cadets scrambling for cover. Many faltered, tripping on roots or sliding down muddy slopes. Navigated the terrain effortlessly, guiding the cadets with subtle gestures, her movements clear yet silent. Every decision she made was calculated. Which path was safest, which cover offered concealment, how to maintain the group's cohesion under stress. Her experience in real combat shone through. Nothing in this exercise could shake her calm. One cadet panicked as a simulated grenade landed nearby, was instantly at his side, pressing him to the ground, pointing silently toward safer cover. His heart raced, but her presence grounded him. Another cadet faltered while crossing a rocky ravine, reached out, steadying him, and positioned him for the next move. The group began to realize they were witnessing a master at work. She was not merely surviving the environment, she was controlling it, teaching without speaking, leading without asserting authority. Instructors, struggling to keep up, watched in awe as tactical brilliance unfolded in real time. Her knowledge of terrain, stealth, and team coordination was unparalleled. She anticipated hazards before they appeared, neutralized threats before cadets even recognized them, and maintained perfect situational awareness throughout. Every step, every choice, every movement reinforced why true Rangers relied on skill, not equipment, to survive. The extraction route led them through treacherous terrain, steep inclines, dense undergrowth, and unpredictable streams. Visibility was near zero, yet moved fluidly, guiding the group to safety. Cadets who had doubted her strength or judgment now followed instinctively, trusting her guidance completely. The night became a living lesson in leadership, discipline, and survival under pressure. By the time they reached the extraction point, sweat and mud coating their uniforms, cadets were exhausted but exhilarated. Paused at the clearing, surveying the group with steady eyes. Every cadet had followed her lead, and every cadet had survived. The instructors took notes silently, humbled by the level of mastery they had just witnessed. Had turned a brutal test into a flawless operation, demonstrating that expertise and composure could overcome any challenge. As the helicopter descended to collect them, cadets reflected on the night. They had seen courage in action, skill beyond imagination, and leadership without ego. Hayes had transformed the exercise into a lesson far greater than survival. She had shown them what it meant to endure, to adapt, and to excel under pressure. The fog lifted slightly as the helicopter lifted off, carrying the cadets back, but the impression she left remained indelible. His eyes lingered on the terrain below, aware of every ridge, tree, and shadow. The cadets had learned more than tactics that night. They had glimpsed the mindset of a Ranger elite. Quiet, disciplined, and unstoppable, she was the standard against which all would now measure themselves. And in that silent mountain night, the legend of Hayes grew ever stronger. Dawn broke over the Appalachian Mountains, the first light spilling across the rugged terrain and revealing the aftermath of the night's grueling exercises. Cadets sat quietly, their uniforms streaked with mud and sweat, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and awe. The helicopter had departed hours ago, leaving them with the memory of what they had survived, and the unmistakable presence of Hayes, whose calm, unwavering leadership had guided them through impossible terrain. Stood apart, scanning the horizon with the practiced eyes of a soldier who had seen far more than anyone else here could imagine. Her demeanor was unchanged, serene, yet her presence seemed to anchor the cadets, even in her quiet absence. They had learned that day that true skill was not loud or flashy. It was measured, precise, and often invisible until tested under the harshest conditions. Colonel Mitchell addressed the camp formally, acknowledging his achievements and the lessons she had imparted. "These exercises were designed to test your limits," he said, voice steady but resonant. "Captain Hayes has demonstrated what true Rangers embody: skill, composure, and leadership under pressure. Take what you have seen and let it guide your own growth." Cadets listened, some in disbelief, some in reverent silence, remained quiet, letting the recognition be theirs to witness. The cadets who had once doubted her now regarded her with unspoken respect. Conversation circled her feats, parachute-less jumps, flawless fast-rope insertions, ambush drills executed with surgical precision, and the night extraction that had tested every nerve. Their previous assumptions crumbled, had taught them that fear was only an obstacle when uncontrolled, that focus could turn chaos into order, and that humility often concealed the greatest strength. Instructors and cadets alike reflected on the profound lesson of her presence. Excellence is not always visible until tested, and true capability does not demand validation. Had operated without ego, without seeking admiration, yet her actions had commanded it. By the end of the exercises, she had done more than train cadets. She had inspired them, showing that determination, discipline, and quiet confidence were as vital as physical prowess. As the camp settled into the quiet of the early morning, cadets moved about with a new mindset. Some reviewed their notes, replaying scenarios and instructions, while others silently imitated the calm precision had displayed. Every gesture, every measured movement became a model for their own behavior. She had transformed their understanding of what it meant to be a Ranger, revealing lessons that no manual or drill could ever teach. Prepared to leave the base, her gear packed neatly, movements deliberate as always. Cadets and instructors lined the paths, offering nods, quiet smiles, and muttered thanks. Words were unnecessary. Her impact had been made through action, not speech. As she walked toward the transport, the mountain wind carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, her presence left an indelible impression. The camp had been changed forever. The helicopter lifted, its blades cutting through the morning light. Below, cadets watched silently, reflecting on what they had witnessed: courage without arrogance, skill without display, and leadership that inspired without command. Hayes had not only survived their challenges, she had redefined them. The mountains seemed to hold her story in their silence, a tale of resilience, mastery, and quiet authority. And as the cadets dispersed, each carried a fragment of her legacy: the understanding that true Rangers survive and thrive not by luck, equipment, or bravado, but by preparation, focus, and skill honed through experience. Hayes disappeared into the horizon, a living testament to endurance and excellence. Her story would echo through the camp long after the helicopters had gone, an enduring reminder that sometimes the greatest lessons come from the quietest, most capable individuals.